All of the situations I found myself in professionally were usually because I neglected doing my due diligence, or there was something I could have done to keep that from happening. The quality of your life is dependent on how many hard conversations you're willing to have. I think it's Tim Ferriss I heard that from, and it's really the truth. Welcome back to the Drum Show podcast. We got a really great question from Ryan, who has been drumming for a number of years, and that's, for any of you that don't know, that's how this podcast was started, right? And a lot of times I find that even though you may be in a bit of a different situation, you have the same struggles as other people. And this has to do with whether you're just playing for yourself, whether you are a weekend warrior, whether you're doing this full time, which Ryan is doing, or no matter how long you've been doing it. It has to do with those goals, and it has to do with what's acceptable and what's not acceptable whenever you are either just doing it as a hobby, doing it for a little bit of pay, or doing it for a full-time gig. So I thought this was interesting enough, and I asked him, I said, would you mind if I just break this out in a podcast? Because I think it's a valid discussion to have. So I'm just gonna read the actual email, which I've done many times before. So he says, hey man, I'm going through kind of a tough time with my drumming career. I'm not struggling with my playing or getting and keeping gigs. It's nothing like that. I just feel stuck. I didn't want to tour anymore, so I left Nashville and went back home where I knew I could make a living drumming and teaching, and no one would ask me to go on the road. I purchased my apartment this time instead of renting to combat the financial issues of being a drummer. I got into one of the busiest top 40 bands in town and am playing over 100 gigs a year and teaching about 25 students online and in person. I've worked so hard to get where I'm at, but I feel like it's never going to get better. Still getting paid what I was making years and years ago. As prices of living rise, musicians still seem to make the same money. I just watched your video about not quitting. I just don't know what to do anymore. And I'm thinking of just teaching full-time and leaving behind the gigging aspect. Any advice? Hope you're well. As well, he kind of followed up with a little bit more explanation. He said it's hard to get by. Even with my busy schedule though, it's also very easy to get fed up with certain artists who might not share tips or pay an unequal amount for their musicians. So a lot of this is good info that we can kind of break out and talk about. Or my favorite, the artists you play for that play solo gigs as well. Therefore you don't make any money, so you try to pick up a fill-in gig if one is available on that specific day, or start another band to work on the off days, and then they don't want to stick to that schedule, or getting stuck in the endless rehearsals. That's a big pitfall. I still get the spark from gigging and definitely from teaching, though that aha moment when a student gets it is like fireworks for me, and I still get that rush when I finish my last student for the week and say to myself, sweet, now I get to play drums. Prime time for gig time. However, I know I'm not getting ahead. I'm kind of just doing the same things over and over, and they all pay about the same as they ever did. I've come to the conclusion you either do it or you don't do it. The person that started drumming 1 to 2 years ago might have a band and is making the same amount of money as someone who has done it for 20 years and sounds polished. The venues don't care about that. They just want anyone playing something on that stage, be it good or bad. I'm looking for advice from someone who has been around the block and maybe has shared these feelings or thoughts in my capacity. Okay, so a lot of really good things there. And this can, the reason I said this can apply to you, even if you are just a hobbyist drummer, and you're like, Steven, I just practice in my room, maybe jam with my buddies on the weekends. We as humans are hardwired to we want to have forward motion, right? The saying always goes, you're either moving forward or you're going backwards. Like there's no sitting still, right? At least for me, that seems to be this. We just don't tread water for long. You need to either go forward or you're going to start going backwards. And so, whenever maybe you're just a hobbyist drummer, that may entail like, I'm getting kind of bored. I'm playing every day, but it's like playing the same old things. And that has to do with like, we haven't set our goals properly. Or maybe you're getting frustrated because you don't play as fast as another drummer, and we're only focusing on one aspect of that. And you don't really begin to have these different pillars in your drumming. What would I mean by pillars? So this is a concept that I don't know if I came up with it. I don't remember reading about it, although other people will call it other things. And it's kind of what I build my life around. It's like I have certain pillars in my life, or I may even break it down into certain pillars into like my drumming. And I need to be delivering to all those pillars, and none of them can get too much taller than the others. If they do, they can only stay that way for a very small amount of time, because if not, things are going to topple. We can't be out of balance that much. And so for you, if you're a hobbyist drummer, and then I'll get to like go down the walkway or go down the road with paid as well. You may not just want to judge yourself on how fast you're playing. You may also want to begin judging yourself on, have I completed the material that I've done? How much enjoyment am I getting out of this? Have I met my goals of playing with some other musicians? Have I met my goals for number of songs learned? You know, like, it can't just be I'm advancing in my lesson material, so that's got to make me happy. Well, you might be advancing in your lesson material, but it might be material you're really not interested in, or maybe you're doing that material and you're not learning enough songs. There's a lot of different ways we can do this. But in other words, what happens is exactly what's happened with you, Ron, and it introduces stall out, right? So we introduce a point where we're going to stall, and it's like, okay, well, what do I do from here? So let's address it when it comes to gigging, okay? So in my own life, I have these different pillars that I deliver to, right? It's family, it's finances, and faith, and, you know, the three big F's. And then we have, you know, my personal enjoyment of it. We have, you know, personal fulfillment, monetary, like all of these different areas where, and I'll give you a for instance, because you talked about going out on the road. Road work is great, usually pays decent, not all the time, but it can. And you're right, it has not increased in pay as the cost of living has risen, right? So it's not like, oh, the cost of living is 40% more, musicians on the road are getting paid 40% more. It's really just not, it hasn't grown in scale with that. For the most part. And so, but don't worry, there's hope. We got to just walk through this. So let's say, oh, I've got a gig and I'm making enough, so I'm fulfilling professionally because I'm succeeding, and I'm fulfilling financially because all the bills are paid. And maybe this is personally fulfilling too, not just professionally and financially. Maybe it's personally fulfilling because maybe you're hitting some goals of like playing venues you wanted to play, or playing in front of a certain number of people, or all that stuff. But then on the other side, you're gone all the time. So maybe you have a family. Like I have a family with 3 kids and a wife, and I like seeing them, right? And so maybe it's like, okay, well, I'm not seeing them that much. And after years of touring, all of a sudden you have finances, professional, personal goals were way up here, and the family's way down here, right? That doesn't work for me. Why? Because, and I have to break family out from my relationship with my wife, because sometimes the family can be churning, but our relationship isn't so great, right? So if these 2 pillars down here that are way down here, and these are way up here. I've talked to my wife before, it's not 1 missed birthday, it's 10 missed birthdays, right? That's the cumulative effect of a touring lifestyle where you can only make money if you're gone. And so at that point, we have to adjust and go, okay, how can I make some money in town? A lot of people, and it's kind of a funny thing, people are like, oh, he must not have been making a living doing it until he started teaching. It's really not the case. I want you to understand that. When I first moved to Nashville, I was making enough, ends were meeting. Now, it's the same as with any other gigging musician. It's feast or famine. And that means the work's either coming in or it's not, and you're trying to hustle to get that work. So one month may be 3x what the other month was, but kind of in the end, they all balance out. And that's the ups and downs and trying to get stability in this lifestyle. But what was happening was I was gone, and my wife, Kelly, got pregnant, and then we had our first son. And I just started kind of looking ahead. I wasn't able to say what gigs I got because I just was taking whatever gigs. I wasn't able to say how much I got paid, kind of like you, and I wasn't able to make as much money as I needed to by staying home. So I had to travel, and I just kind of began to look ahead and go, oh man, you know, if I can only make money when I'm gone, like good money. I had a fictitious conversation with my son when he got older, and I was like 70 or 80, and we're having this discussion of Dad was gone all the time. And the discussion got hung up for me whenever he got to the question, yeah, but at least you love what you were doing. Because any touring musician may tell you, yeah, it pays the bills. Like, this isn't like, you know, it doesn't light my fire creatively, it pays the bills. You don't always get both of those, right? And I had a problem with that. I was like, okay, wait a second. So I may be gone my whole life, and it was just a paycheck, and I could, you know, so I began to reassess some things. I very consciously and specifically talked to my wife about quitting the music business for a while so I could reassess some things and figure out how to do it. And she said, well, do you think you'll ever get back into it? I said, yes, I will, but I'll say how much I get paid, when I get paid, who I work with, what the work, like I had all these criteria, you know? And I said, you know, the internet's kind of like just getting humming. YouTube is a new thing. It was back in like 2008, 2009. So YouTube's this new thing. Maybe some people want some online lessons. I don't know, but I'm not in a position where I can even do that right now. I didn't even own I just bought my first computer, right? I was very much coming out of college and just kind of bootstrapping things. And so I made that decision. The best decision I ever made was to step out of music for a little while, and I picked up personal training, something that I could support and provide for my family while I figured out the other. And in the meantime, I actually started teaching some for free on the side online and kind of getting things rolling, feeling what that might feel like, assessing that. I got into an original band. We wound up getting signed by Universal Records, so I guess I didn't step out completely. So all of these things, but I very consciously stepped out of it, right? I did not, this was not something, I try to make conscious decisions. I try not to just let things happen to me. And it was because I wanted to be able to say how much I got paid, when I worked, all the things you were having issues with. So one of the things that we have to get very, very clear on is to set some criteria for how we will accept gigs, what we will accept on the gig, what the pay is that we'll accept for the gig, all of those things, whether they're tip sharing, all of those things. If I'm going to give you priority, then you've got to give me some kind of, some kind of guarantee that you're going to have enough work for me, that kind of stuff. And so I think listening to what you're writing, everything, it would behoove you to sit down and write out some things like, in a perfect world, I would make this much. In a perfect world, I'd do this. And all the situations you're involved in, you don't just have to be involved in those situations. You see, as long as we're involved in one situation, we don't have any room for the other situations to come in. All right, so if I am on a gig, I do not have any room for another gig. Why? Because I've already got a gig in my life, right? So I have to remove that gig from my life. Oh, I don't want to. Look, sometimes you have to. There was a book I was reading the other day, and they were talking about, if you'll never get new blinds as long as blinds are still hanging there. Why? Because blinds are there, like in your house for the window. Like you've already got blinds up there. If you hate the curtains or the blinds, take them down. And once you look at that empty window for long enough, you're going to go buy some, right? You're going to find a way to get the money because people can see in your house. And it's the same way with life. We have to sometimes make some room. And I'm at a spot in my life where my wife and I just got away for a weekend, and we had this discussion of, hey, let's roll back on some things. We're going to very consciously create some space in our lives, and we're going to say no to a lot of things because we want to allow the space for things to come in and allow space for us just to be able to raise our family, because they're not going to stay teenagers all, my daughter's not going to be 7 her whole life. So let's enjoy that and let's make some space. She and I are the type that's very easy to fill up with things because we just like being busy. So I think that you're already feeling it, and I think this is a really good time for you to begin to do some self-assessment, and instead of demanding that the changes happen right now, like, okay, what does that look like to me? What do I want to get paid on a gig? What do I want to get paid for my one-on-one teaching? Is my one-on-one teaching worth that? And then we start going down that rabbit hole. Okay, if I raised prices in my teaching, how would I do that ethically? And then you start putting together, okay, this is the email I would send out, and this is the, because a lot of people don't get, but if you raise, let's say you've got 25 students and you're seeing them once a week, well, if you raise their lesson cost by, you raise it by $5, right? And I'm not the world's best at math, but if you raise it by $5, that's $125, something like that. But that's every week if you're seeing them weekly. So you just boosted your income by $125. If you raise it by $10, you've just boosted your income by $250 a week. You've just boosted your income by $1,000 a month. So this is how I start, but you can't see right now, it feels like you don't have a definite goal. You're just frustrated that you're not making what you want to make. What do you want to make? This podcast is brought to you by the Drum Better Daily program. That's actually my online drum school that I've run now for 12 plus years. Not only have I been playing the drums professionally since the age of 15, I've been teaching since the age of 18. Matter of fact, I talked to one of my first student a few days ago. I actually called him to see if he could sub a gig out for me. Daniel, love you, man. And he's still playing. He's still doing it on a pro level. And I have been committed to teaching for 22 plus years now. I would love to have you go check it out at stevensdrumshed.com. You can find a link to that in the show notes or video description, whichever platform you're watching it on. But it truly is a community of like-minded drummers where we are striving to just be the best that we can be at the drums. In addition to over 70 pre-recorded drum courses, there's also a tech talk area where we talk about everything technology related as it pertains to the drums, e-kits, recording, doing videos, all of that stuff. There are forums where you can hang out with the other students as well. We do 2 live video student calls every week that you can join if you'd like to. We do guest artist calls monthly, and I'll even make you a personalized lesson plan if that's what you need. Yes, we talk about the nuts and bolts of drumming. Yes, I give you exercises, but we also talk a lot about how to practice more efficiently, how to practice better, and how to get more out of your practice time. I know you're just like me. You're busy, you're being pulled by work, by family, by friends, by other responsibilities. Whenever you practice, you really want to see gains and have it be productive. That is what we focus on in the Drum Better Daily program. I'll have to say personally, it's been really cool because some of these students I've worked with for over 12 years, we started running drum camps here in 2022, and I got to meet some of them in person for the first time. Those drum camps have been selling out, blowing my mind with how much fun they are and how great a time it is to bring the community together in person. I'd love to have you be a part of it. And then once we have that, then we start working backwards for like, okay, cool. And it may not be all of your gigs that are aggravating you. There may be some gigs that are aggravating you, that they're not tip sharing on. Sometimes that's just a conversation, be like, hey, I feel like we're all working pretty hard, we're not tip sharing. Is that just like is that a thing that you're gonna do from now on? And if that's the case, you may want to say, okay, hey, I'm gonna step out. I'm sorry, but I feel like that. And then you go find something else, right? So I think all of the situations I found myself in professionally were usually because I neglected doing my due diligence, or there was something I could have done to keep that from happening. But definitely, the quality of your life is dependent on how many hard conversations you're willing to have. I think it's Tim Ferriss I heard that from. And it's really the truth. So it may only be 1 or 2 conversations you need to have with 1 or 2 groups, and they may either sort themselves out or you let go of them so that you can go find something else. When it comes to the teaching aspect of it, just because everybody in your town is charging something doesn't mean you have to charge it. Now there is a going rate, right? So you need to find out what that is in your town. And then if you charge above that, you need to figure out, why am I charging above that? What is worth it? And am I worth that? Am I worth, is this a premier experience? Is this, you may just be below everybody else. Like, again, there's ways to work towards this that I think there's a lot of different avenues. You can also, as a drum instructor, you can write your own curriculum. If you sit down and organize your curriculum, you can ask students to purchase that curriculum from you. So hey, this is book 1. It's going to be $20, and then they get book 1. Then you work through book 1. This is a very ethical thing. It's okay to have creative information that you have put down on page that you're teaching from, and then they pay you to get that. That's okay. You may say, hey, I'm happy to record your lessons now, and I'll send you the download. You may charge $5-10 extra for that. So there's different ways that you can find to charge within that. You may start with a group class. Hey, we're going to do once a week a group class where we bring in bass, guitar, and drums, and the goal is that we're playing as a band, so almost a rock band setup. Lots of different things we can do if we get creative, but I think it really is you needing to sit down and figure out what do I want to get paid, and then setting that line. And if somebody comes and says, hey, we got a gig, you say, okay, cool. I'm very quick to talk about, what does this pay? I'm very quick to ask the question here in Nashville. Somebody says, hey, you want to do a run of dates with us? I'm like, van or bus? That's one of my first questions. They're like, van. Okay, we got a lot of discussions happening, right? Because if I'm going to be sitting in a van with a bunch of people at this point in my career, I better really love them or love the music. And so, immediately if it's a van, it's like, boop, red flags. It's not a no, because maybe I just want to do it. But it's definitely not a yes. If they say a bus, okay, we move on to the next thing. Okay, what's it pay? Well, and you may find out, hey, this pays, X number of dollars per gig. Okay, what's the per diem? Yeah, we don't have any per diem. Okay, well, you have to factor that in, because if you go on the road for 4 or 5 days, you and I both know you got to eat. You can't just not eat. And you can be like, oh, I'll just get by. Dude, getting by for months on just like peanut butter and sandwiches sucks. So you have to kind of begin to come up with these questions that you're going to ask as people approach you with gigs. And then don't just assume you have to take that. You can be like, hey, I want to do this gig, but this is what it's going to cost. And then they know, if we hire him, this is what it costs. And if they go get someone else, then they go get someone else. I don't know. Another thing that you may want to do is start a band of your own. So if you're going to be in the band scene and the bar scene, cover band scene, look, I know some very, very good musicians, and they have cornered certain parts of the market if they're going to be in that cover band scene. The wedding band market is very big. The corporate market is very big. I was just talking to a buddy of mine who I hadn't talked to in a very long time. We were trading off. Kelly and I went away for a weekend, and I actually went to meet him to give him a cymbal for a buddy of mine across town that neither of us wanted to drive, so it was kind of a midway point. Anyway, so we went and heard him play and ate some food, and it was good to catch up. But he was saying, he had started a Jimmy Buffett tribute band. And he was getting great work and had shot some good videos, and they did if you wanted a Jimmy Buffett thing in this, they are the people, and they're going to act professional. And he's like, yeah, I don't even deal with gigs that cost this much. He said they got to pay this much for us to go out of town, or I turn them down. So he started to get a name for himself of, no, they're a premium band with a premium product, and you have to pay this much money, right? But you probably know enough at this point that you should look into doing something like that. And then you become the person that's booking the gigs. You become the person that's going to the clubs. You become, like, I have gone to clubs before and I'm like, look, I don't like the music you have here. I think I can provide great music. And I tell them, I'm like, if you don't like the music, you don't have to pay. I mean, this was back in the day when I was kind of hustling a lot harder. I said, if you don't like the music, you don't have to pay us for that night. You get a free night of music. Not one club has ever taken me up on that. Every club has wound up booking us for years. Okay, even if it's just a Thursday night residency. Then you start locking them into, you've got a consistent crowd because you deliver a consistent product, and then you start going and talking to them like, hey, we're going to need to bump this up because I see how much your bar's making, I see how much your restaurant's making, we'd like a slice of that. We're still getting paid the same as we were 6 months ago, and yet your business is 4x on those nights. So I have those conversations. You have to treat that like a business on that side. So I wouldn't just say everybody's getting paid the same, everybody this, everybody that. That's not the truth. There are people that are making large amounts of money. Now, there is this kind of trough of middle where everybody's getting paid down to the same. And you're right, it hasn't, $300 to $500 a gig on the road is somewhat standard, unfortunately, for a lot of mid-tier artists. So you have to begin to assess that and go, okay, do I want to hang out here? But I think sit down and figure out, what are my pillars? What do I want to keep balanced here? Then start figuring out, what do I need to make so that I feel like I'm having some advancement in this career, so that I feel like I'm moving forward, and then start to figure out, okay, that means I need $2,000 more a month. Where do you find that? Right? You got 25 drum students, I can find that for you, a half of that right there, up each lesson $10. And you just tell them, look, here's why I'm upping it, here's this, here's that, whatever that looks like for you. And then you come up with a letter and you send it out. You're like, well, what if I lose 5 students? Okay, you lose 5 students and go find 5 more that look like the other 20. Find out who that is that you want, that feels it's worth paying that for you. And then start looking into some other hard conversations you may have to have. Start looking into some situations you may need to quit to get out of them because you weren't clear enough and they really are kind of breaking your rules that you've set. And then begin to looking at, and I think this may be the biggest thing, is you're feeling growth, and that's uncomfortable. And you're like, wait a second, I think I've grown past some of this. And chances are you have. Chances are you know enough that you have grown past some of this. And that may be stepping into a role as a bigger part. You may need to start doing the booking. You may need to start being the, because look, if you're booking a band, take the band leader pay. You can take a booking fee. Like, you take that stuff. And then all the things you didn't like that the other bands did, don't do that with those musicians. If you never appreciated that they didn't share tips, you always share tips, because then you start being known as the premier gig to get in town, right? Not only are you the premier gig for people to book, but you're also the premier gig for people to get on, because they're like, no, that dude's fair. He pays us fair. Yeah, he takes a leader fee. That's totally fine. But you're up front. You're like, I'm not hiding anything from you. Here's what's happening. We get tips. You get you get your portion of that. I'm gonna book it because I'm booking it and running the band. This is what I'm gonna all of those things are totally fine to do. But I think this is a great opportunity for you to grow and to have some hard conversations with yourself and maybe with the people you're working with. And I don't know, it feels more like, instead of like, oh man, this is just where I'm gonna be, it feels more like you're kind of in a cocoon that's too small for you, and now it's time to like spread those wings out and move to the next thing. Or kind of like crabs, when they outgrow that shell, it's like, gotta find a bigger shell, right? I think as we go in our career, we need to we need to expect more from our career. But anyway, and that goes for anybody, even if you're just practicing. I think we need to expect more from our practice time. Your goals in 3 years are not going to be the same as your goals when you just started the instrument, right? Your goals are going to grow, so we need to constantly reassess those. And some of you are like, yeah, I'm kind of bored playing by myself in my basement. It may be time for you to get out and play with people. Oh, that's scary. Yeah, that's part of growth. Growth can be a little unnerving, right? But it's those types of things that we need to start assessing with ourselves and going, yeah, I don't think this is a depressing thing. I think this is a growth thing, and I need to step into that. So I think there's some things, Ryan, just judging from my own life, that discomforts and those types of things. I think there are some areas that you're ready for growth in. You can feel that growth. And I think there's also some areas where you need to create some space and allow life to send you some other things to fill that space up. And that may be saying no to some things. You may be at a point where you're able to be like, okay, I'm going to start saying no, and I'm going to be selective. And that's totally a fine thing to do, and a natural evolution in any career or field.